Spoke a little earlier to U.S. Congressman Krishnamoorthi. He's a ranking member on the House Select Committee on the Chinese Communist Party, and he's a Democrat from Illinois. Congressman, I want to start with some of what we saw come out of the meeting on Monday between France's president, the European Commission president, and China's president. France's President Macron welcoming China's pledges not to sell any arms to Russia. At the same time, we saw President Xi say that he warned against using Ukraine to, quote, smear a third country and incite a new Cold War. What do you think of that?
Well, I think he's probably referring to our description of their assistance to the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And I think the description is truthful, that they are assisting the Russians through selling them dual-use components, selling them machine tools that are used in the production of armaments, selling semiconductors that are used in their missiles. And sometimes the truth hurts, Sumi. And Xi Jinping does not like the fact that others are calling him out for what they're doing.
How much influence do you think Xi Jinping has over Russia and Vladimir Putin on its war on Ukraine?
I think he has tremendous influence. Remember, he is the largest purchaser of Russian oil, not to mention the largest supplier of their semiconductors used in the production of their armaments.
So what would you like to see Europe do here and also the U.S. to put more pressure on China?
I think we have to act in concert. We have to make sure that we speak with one voice, namely that the Chinese need to reduce their aggression economically, militarily, as well as technologically. And that if they reduce their aggression, for instance, in the South China Sea or with regard to Taiwan or with regard to supplying or using their leverage to make sure the Russians ease off in Ukraine, and then they not dump their excess goods so that they basically undercut their competition in Europe, which is what I mean by economic aggression. If they do those things, then we will reduce our countermeasures and we'll be able to engage more with them. And they will also help their economy at the same time.
They did discuss as well this practice that you described of flooding European markets with Chinese goods. Ursula von der Leyen, the European Commission president, talked about steel, electric vehicles. I want to tell you what Chinese media quoted President Xi as saying. He said that the overcapacity, quote, does not exist either from the perspective of comparative advantage or in light of global demand. He's essentially saying there is no flooding of markets. What do you think of that?
Well, he's wrong, and he knows it. They are flooding all kinds of markets with their cheap electric vehicles, which are often sold at under the cost of production. And this is the same playbook that they've used year after year with regard to any number of goods, whether it's steel, whether it's solar panels, whether it's other cheap consumer products and so forth. The problem is the Chinese economy is tanking right now, so they don't have domestic demand for the quantity of goods that they're producing. So what they do is they basically ship or export all those goods abroad, sell them at a price less than their cost of producing oftentimes, and then they undercut their competition and destroy them. And then they become the sole source of a lot of those goods, thus having potential leverage or source of coercion. We're not gonna tolerate that playbook anymore. And so that's why it's important that we speak with one voice across the world.
Okay, you say speak with one voice. A lot has been made about the fact that there are differences even between European Union countries on relations with China. And we saw President Xi saying today that France and China should avoid a, quote, new Cold War between global blocs. Are you worried that China is trying to drive a wedge between France, its partners, and the U.S.?
That's what they're trying to do, for sure. But we have to remember that if we are going to help set the international rules of the road, so to speak, with regard to economics, security issues, and technological ones, we need to stay united in the principles that we believe in, such as, for instance, you shouldn't be invading other sovereign countries, like what Russia has done with Ukraine and what China has often threatened to do with regard to Taiwan. Other similar principles should animate the way that we conduct ourselves and help to set norms and expectations with regard to the Chinese as well.
Congressman, that's all we have time for today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, thank you, Sumi.